The sky over Colony 17 had been clear all morning. Just another ordinary day on the dusty mining planet where nothing exciting ever happened. Kids played in the settlement square while their parents worked the extraction rigs. The twin suns beat down on the red dirt, and everything seemed perfectly normal until it wasn't. 7-year-old Billy Carter was chasing his homemade hoverball across the playground when the first shadow passed overhead. It moved fast, impossibly fast for something so massive. The other kids stopped playing and looked up. Billy's ball rolled to a stop as the temperature suddenly dropped 20 degrees. Then the screaming started. The creature that descended from the clouds was something out of humanity's worst nightmares. A Dracelian. The galaxy's most terrifying apex predator. Its body stretched nearly 200 feet from snout to tail, covered in scales that shimmered with colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Some described them as oil-slick rainbows, others said they looked like captured starlight. Either way, they were beautiful and absolutely horrifying. The dragon's wings blocked out the suns as it descended. Each beat sent shockwaves through the air that rattled buildings and knocked smaller children off their feet. Colony alarms blared too late. Security forces scrambled for weapons they knew would be useless. Dracelians had been known to shrug off military-grade missiles like mosquito bites. Billy stood frozen in the middle of the square. His legs wouldn't move. His brain screamed at him to run, but his body refused to listen. He could only stare up at the massive creature landing 50 feet away with a ground-shaking thud that cracked the pavement. The dragon's head swiveled toward him. Its eyes were the worst part. They glowed with an inner light, like stars dying in slow motion. But there was something else in those eyes. Something that looked almost like thought. Like intelligence. That made it so much worse. Billy's mom, Rachel, was running toward him from the market stalls. His dad, Tom, came sprinting from the opposite direction, shouting his name. But they were too far away. Everything happened in seconds. The dragon's massive talons reached out. Billy squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the pain, waiting for everything to end. But the claws closed around him with shocking gentleness. Like someone picking up a kitten. The dragon's grip was firm but careful, holding him securely without crushing. Then they were moving. Up, fast. Billy's stomach dropped as the ground fell away beneath him. He could hear his parents screaming his name, could see the tiny figures of people running around like ants below. The colony shrank to the size of a toy model, then disappeared entirely as they punched through the clouds. The ride into space should have killed him. Should have frozen him solid or suffocated him in the thin upper atmosphere. But somehow the dragon's body generated a protective bubble of warm, breathable air around them both. Billy gasped and wheezed but stayed alive as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. They traveled for what felt like hours. Billy stopped screaming eventually because his throat hurt too much. He just hung there in the dragon's gentle grip, watching hyperspace blur past them in streaks of impossible color. His mind couldn't process what was happening. This kind of thing didn't happen to normal kids from mining colonies. When they finally stopped, Billy found himself in an asteroid field. The dragon landed on a massive rock floating in space, carrying him into a cave that had been carved and expanded into something like a lair. But it wasn't what Billy expected. Sure, there were piles of precious metals and salvaged ship parts scattered everywhere. That made sense for a dragon's hoard. But there were other things too. Human things. Books. Actual paper books, dozens of them, carefully stacked in alcoves. Data pads arranged by size. Pieces of human technology that looked like they'd been studied and taken apart. A child's stuffed toy sitting on a shelf. Photographs pinned to the cave wall. It looked less like a monster's den and more like a weird collector's museum. The dragon set Billy down carefully on a flat area that had been covered with salvaged cushions and blankets. Human-sized blankets. Like it had been preparing for this. The creature settled down about 20 feet away, curling its massive body into a resting position, those glowing eyes never leaving him. Billy pressed himself against the cave wall, heart hammering. He was alive. Confused and terrified, but alive. The dragon hadn't hurt him. Hadn't even tried to hurt him. It just watched him with those intelligent, almost curious eyes. Why would a space monster kidnap a kid and then just sit there watching? What could it possibly want? And more importantly, would anyone ever find him out here in the middle of nowhere? Billy's hands shook as the reality of his situation sank in. He was alone, millions of miles from home, trapped with a creature that could swallow him whole without even noticing. The dragon made a low rumbling sound, almost like it was trying to communicate. Billy hugged his knees and tried not to cry. Billy's first night in the asteroid cave was the longest of his life. He didn't sleep. How could he? Every time the dragon shifted its massive body, the whole cave seemed to shake. Every breath it took sounded like wind rushing through a tunnel. He sat there in the darkness, watching those glowing eyes that never seemed to blink, wondering if this was how his story would end. But morning came. Or at least, what Billy guessed was morning, since there was no actual sun out here in space. The dragon stirred, stretched its enormous wings, and then did something completely unexpected. It left. Billy watched the creature fly out of the cave entrance, disappearing into the asteroid field. For a moment, he considered trying to escape, but escape to where? He was in space. There was nowhere to run. So he waited. The dragon returned 20 minutes later carrying something in its claws. Billy pressed himself against the wall, terrified, until he saw what it was. Food containers. Human food containers. The kind they used back on the colony. The dragon set them down gently near Billy and backed away, watching him expectantly. Billy stared at the containers. His stomach growled despite his fear. Slowly, carefully, he crawled forward and opened one. Inside was actual food. Protein bars, dried fruit, water pouches. All human stuff. The dragon had somehow known what he needed and went to get it. This went on for 3 days. The dragon would leave, return with supplies, and then just watch him. It never tried to hurt him. Never even came too close. It just observed him like Billy was the most fascinating thing it had ever seen. Which was weird because Billy was just a regular kid who liked video games and hated math homework. On the 4th day, everything changed. Billy woke up to find the dragon doing something strange. It was moving pieces of salvaged technology around, arranging them in what looked like a deliberate pattern. After an hour of watching this bizarre behavior, the dragon activated something. A holographic display flickered to life, showing symbols and shapes Billy didn't recognize. The dragon made that rumbling sound again, gesturing with one massive claw toward the display. Billy shook his head, not understanding. The creature seemed frustrated. It tried again, manipulating the display, cycling through different interfaces until suddenly, miraculously, human text appeared. It was a translation device. An old one, probably salvaged from a destroyed diplomatic ship. The dragon had been trying to set it up this whole time. The first words that appeared on the screen made Billy's blood run cold. Please do not be afraid. I need your help. Billy stared at the words, then at the dragon, then back at the words. The massive creature was looking at him with what he could only describe as hope in those alien eyes. His hands were shaking as he moved closer to the device. He typed slowly. Why did you take me? The response came after a moment. The dragon seemed to be thinking, choosing its words carefully. My kind are dying. I am dying. You are my last hope. Over the next several hours, through that flickering translation device, Billy learned the truth about Dracelians. Everything humanity thought they knew was wrong. They weren't mindless monsters attacking ships for fun. They were ancient beings, millions of years old, who had been studying the galaxy since before humans even existed. The dragon, who said its name roughly translated to Ashenwing, explained that Dracelians were scholars. Philosophers. Observers of civilizations. They attacked ships because they were trying to collect information, to learn, to understand. They didn't realize they were causing harm because the concept of communication with other species had never occurred to them. They'd been alone for so long that they'd forgotten how to be anything else. But now they were paying the price for that isolation. Ashenwing showed Billy images on the display. Memories, somehow translated into visual data. Billy saw what the dragon saw, felt what it felt. He experienced the weight of millions of years of existence. Watching stars be born and die. Seeing thousands of alien civilizations rise and fall. Remembering everything, every single moment, every detail, for eons. And that was the problem. The forgetting, Ashenwing called it. Every Dracelian eventually succumbed to it. Their minds were so ancient, so full of millions of years of memories, that eventually they couldn't process anymore. They would just stop. Freeze in space like statues, their consciousness drowning in an ocean of their own past. Within months, sometimes weeks, the forgetting would claim them completely. There were only 4 to 7 Dracelians left in the entire galaxy. All of them were approaching the end. Their species was going extinct not from war or disease, but from the simple fact that they'd lived too long and forgotten how to truly live. Billy felt tears running down his face as he watched these memories. Despite his fear, despite everything, he felt sorry for this creature. Imagine living for millions of years and being completely, utterly alone the entire time. Never having a friend. Never asking for help. Never even knowing those things were possible. But why me? Billy typed. I'm just a kid. What can I do? Ashenwing's response appeared slowly, like the dragon was being very careful with the words. I have studied humans for 3 centuries. Your kind possesses something mine has lost. You teach each other. You learn through connection, through emotion, through bonds we do not understand. Human children especially. They learn not just facts, but meaning, purpose. You make memories matter. I believe if I can understand this before the forgetting takes me, perhaps I can save my people. Perhaps we can remember not just what happened, but why it mattered. Billy sat back, overwhelmed. This ancient space dragon had kidnapped him because it wanted to learn how to be human. How to feel. How to care. How to make millions of years of memories actually mean something instead of just being data filling up its head. It was the craziest thing Billy had ever heard. But looking into those desperate, glowing eyes, he realized something important. Ashenwing wasn't a monster. It was just scared and alone and running out of time. Just like anyone else would be. Billy wiped his eyes and typed a new question, one that would change everything. Okay. So when do we start? Teaching a dragon turned out to be the strangest thing Billy had ever done. And he'd once tried to teach his cat to use the toilet, so that was saying something. The first lesson was a disaster. Billy tried explaining what friendship meant, and Ashenwing just stared at him with those glowing eyes, completely baffled. The dragon understood complex physics instantly. It could calculate hyperspace trajectories in its head. But the idea that 2 beings might enjoy spending time together for no practical reason? That broke its brain. Why would creatures voluntarily reduce efficiency by coordinating activities? Ashenwing typed through the translator. Billy rubbed his temples. This was going to be harder than he thought. He decided to start simpler. Way simpler. He taught Ashenwing about play. Billy found an old ball bearing in the salvage pile and started bouncing it around the cave. The dragon watched, utterly confused about why this small human was making a metal sphere move in predictable parabolic arcs. What is the purpose of this activity? Ashenwing asked. Fun, Billy replied. It's just fun. Define fun. It's like doing something because it makes you happy, not because you have to. Define happy. Billy groaned. This was like trying to explain color to someone who'd never seen. But he kept trying. He rolled the ball toward Ashenwing. The massive dragon looked at it, then at Billy, then back at the ball. Very carefully, it extended one enormous claw and tapped the ball back. The impact sent it flying across the cave and embedding itself in the wall. Billy couldn't help it. He laughed. And that's when something amazing happened. Ashenwing made a sound Billy had never heard before. A rumbling, crackling noise that shook dust from the ceiling. It took Billy a moment to realize what it was. The dragon was trying to laugh too. It sounded like thunder mixed with rocks grinding together, but it was definitely a laugh. The ancient space creature that had existed for millions of years had just experienced its first moment of genuine amusement. Billy grinned so wide his face hurt. After that breakthrough, things got easier. Sort of. Ashenwing was a brilliant student when it came to memorizing facts, but emotions were harder. The dragon could understand the chemical processes in a human brain when someone felt happy, but actually feeling happy itself? That was different. Billy tried teaching through stories. He told Ashenwing about his life back on the colony. About his best friend Tyler and how they built a treehouse together. About the time his dad taught him to ride a hoverbike and he crashed it into a fence. About his mom's terrible cooking that somehow always tasted good anyway. At first, Ashenwing just catalogued these as data points. But Billy noticed something changing. The dragon started asking questions. Not just what happened next, but how did that make you feel, and why was that important to you? One night, or what Billy guessed was night since time was weird in space, Ashenwing offered something in return. The dragon asked if Billy wanted to see its memories. Real ones, not just images on a screen. Through the psychic link Dracelians could form, Billy could actually experience what Ashenwing had experienced. Billy was terrified but curious. He agreed. The moment the link formed, Billy's mind exploded with sensation. He saw the birth of a star, felt the heat of a supernova from a safe distance, watched an entire civilization evolve from single-celled organisms to spacefaring beings over millions of years. He experienced time in a way no human ever had, stretching out like an infinite road. But more than that, he felt the loneliness. The crushing, absolute loneliness of being the only one of your kind in a sector of space. Of watching everything around you live and die while you just continued existing. Of never having anyone to share these incredible experiences with because the concept of sharing didn't exist in your species. When the link broke, Billy was crying. Not from sadness exactly, but from understanding. Ashenwing had seen the most beautiful things in the universe and had been completely alone for all of it. "I'm sorry," Billy whispered. "I'm so sorry you've been by yourself for so long." Ashenwing was quiet for a long moment. Then words appeared on the translator. "I do not understand. You are expressing regret for circumstances you did not cause. This is illogical." "It's called empathy," Billy explained, wiping his eyes. "It means I feel bad because you feel bad. Even though it's not my fault, I still care that you're hurting." "Why would you care about my pain?" "Because we're friends now. At least, I think we are. That's what friends do. They care about each other." The dragon went very still. Billy worried he'd said something wrong. But then Ashenwing did something it had never done before. It lowered its massive head down to Billy's level, close enough that Billy could feel the heat radiating from its scales. "Friends," Ashenwing repeated through the translator. "We are friends." "Yeah," Billy said, reaching out to touch the dragon's snout. The scales were surprisingly smooth and warm. "We are." Over the following weeks, the lessons continued. Billy taught Ashenwing about jokes, even though the dragon's sense of humor was weird. It found quantum physics funny but didn't understand knock-knock jokes at all. They played simple games. Billy showed Ashenwing how to tell stories, not just recite facts. How to wonder about things instead of just knowing them. And slowly, impossibly, the ancient dragon began to change. It started having opinions about things. It developed preferences. It admitted when it was confused or scared instead of pretending to know everything. Most importantly, it began to care about the present moment instead of just cataloging it for the future. But Billy noticed something worrying. Sometimes Ashenwing would pause mid-conversation, its eyes going distant. It would forget what they'd been talking about. Once, it asked Billy his name even though they'd been together for weeks. The forgetting was getting worse. One day, during a particularly bad episode, Ashenwing suddenly became lucid again and typed frantically. "Billy. We are running out of time. There are 4 to 6 others like me. They are all dying. What you have taught me, what I have learned about connection and meaning and friendship, they need to know this too. But I cannot teach them. I barely understand it myself. And soon I will not remember even this." Billy felt his chest tighten. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that saving one dragon is not enough. My entire species is disappearing. Unless we can share this knowledge, everything we have learned together will die with me." Billy looked at this massive, ancient creature that had somehow become his friend. An idea was forming in his head. A crazy, impossible idea. But then again, a few weeks ago he would have said becoming friends with a space dragon was impossible too. "Then we don't just teach you," Billy said slowly. "We teach all of them. We bring them here. Drakelians have not gathered together in 10,000 years. We are solitary. We do not seek each other out." "Yeah, well, maybe that's the problem." Billy stood up, feeling braver than he had any right to feel. "You said Drakelians have forgotten how to ask for help. So let's remind them. Send out a call. Tell them you need them. If what you've learned is real, if connection really matters, then they'll come." Ashenwing stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since they'd met, Billy saw something new in those alien eyes. "Hope. I will try." Back on Colony 17, Billy's parents were falling apart. Rachel hadn't slept properly in weeks. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that dragon's claws closing around her son. Tom had spent every credit they had hiring anyone who claimed they could track a Drakelian through space. Most were scammers. A few were genuine, but even they admitted the odds were impossible. Then they met Captain Lisa Hayes. Lisa ran a small salvage crew that operated in the outer sectors, places where most people wouldn't dare go. She had a reputation for being crazy, reckless, and somehow always surviving situations that should have killed her. When Rachel and Tom approached her with their impossible request, most people would have laughed them out of the room. Lisa didn't laugh. She'd lost someone to a Drakelian attack years ago. She understood their desperation. "I'll find your boy," she said. "But I can't promise what condition he'll be in when we do." They spent 2 weeks following energy signatures and debris trails through space. Lisa's crew worked around the clock, tracking the impossible. Her engineer, a quiet guy named Pete, managed to isolate the specific radiation pattern Drakelians left behind when they traveled through hyperspace. It was like following footprints that faded after minutes. The trail led them to an asteroid field in a region of space so remote it didn't even have a name on the charts. Lisa's ship, the Wanderer, crept through the massive floating rocks, scanning for any sign of life. They were about to give up when their sensors went crazy. Heat signature. Massive. Definitely a Dracelian. Tom wanted to rush in immediately, but Lisa held him back. We go in smart, or we don't go in at all. That thing could swat us out of space before we even got close. They approached carefully, weapons ready but not armed. No point antagonizing a creature that could tear their ship apart. As they got closer, they could see the cave entrance carved into a large asteroid. And there, sitting near the entrance, was Billy. Alive. Completely alive. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, laughing at something. Rachel screamed her son's name. Tom was already running for the airlock. Lisa had to grab both of them to stop them from doing something stupid like jumping into space without proper suits. Wait. Look. They looked. Billy wasn't alone. The dragon was there, massive and terrifying, but it wasn't threatening him. They were playing some kind of game with a piece of salvaged metal, rolling it back and forth. The dragon was being careful, gentle even, making sure not to hurt the small human child. It took another 20 minutes to properly dock and get everyone into suits. Rachel and Tom practically flew across the space between the ship and the cave. Billy looked up, saw his parents, and his face lit up like a sunrise. Mom. Dad. The reunion was tearful and chaotic. Rachel couldn't stop hugging Billy, checking him for injuries, asking if he was hurt. Tom kept looking between his son and the dragon, trying to understand what he was seeing. Lisa and her crew stayed back, weapons ready just in case. But Billy wasn't scared. He wasn't acting like a prisoner. He was acting like he was exactly where he wanted to be. You have to listen, Billy said, pulling away from his mom. Ashenwing isn't bad. None of them are bad. They're just alone and dying and they need help. Through the translation device, with Billy explaining things his parents could barely comprehend, the truth came out. Rachel and Tom listened to their 7-year-old son explain concepts about alien psychology, ancient species, and the end of a civilization that had existed for millions of years. It sounded insane. But looking at the dragon, seeing how it watched Billy with what could only be described as affection, they couldn't deny something extraordinary had happened here. So what are you saying? Tom asked carefully. You want to stay here? With it? With him, Billy corrected. Ashenwing is a him. And no, not forever. But Dad, there are 4 to 6 other dragons out there, all dying. We can help them. Humans can help them. Honey, we're just normal people, Rachel said softly. We're not scientists or diplomats. We're miners. What could we possibly do? Billy smiled, that stubborn smile Rachel knew meant her son had made up his mind about something. You're a teacher, Mom. You teach kids at the colony school. That's exactly what they need. Before Rachel could respond, Ashenwing moved. The dragon straightened up, its massive head tilting toward the sky. It made a sound, a deep thrumming that seemed to resonate through space itself. Billy explained it was sending out a call, a psychic summons carried on quantum frequencies across the stars. The message was simple. Revolutionary. Terrifying for a species that had never asked for anything. I need help. Nothing happened at first. Hours passed. Lisa's crew got nervous and wanted to leave. Tom and Rachel didn't know what to do. Billy sat with Ashenwing, holding the dragon's claw in his small hand, waiting. Then the sensors started going crazy. One energy signature appeared on the edge of the asteroid field. Then another. Then 3 more. Within an hour, massive shapes were emerging from hyperspace all around them. Dragons. Ancient, enormous, terrifying dragons. Some had scales like midnight, others like ice, some like fire. They came in sizes that defied belief, creatures that had been flying through space since before humans existed. 4 to 6 Dracelians, answering a call that went against everything their species had ever been. They circled the asteroid, wary and hostile, growling at each other in ways that made the space around them vibrate. Lisa grabbed her weapons. We need to leave. Now. That many dragons in one place, we're dead. But Billy walked forward, standing at the edge of the cave. These massive creatures, any one of which could have ended him with a thought, all turned to look at the small human child. They are scared, Billy said quietly. They don't know how to do this. They've been alone so long that being together feels wrong to them. Ashenwing moved beside Billy, protective. Through the translator, it spoke to the others in their own language. Billy couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the emotion behind them. Vulnerability. Admission of weakness. A plea for understanding. The dragons shifted, uncomfortable. Some looked ready to leave. This had been a mistake. They were creatures of solitude. This gathering went against their nature. That's when Rachel Carter, teacher from a nowhere mining colony, stepped forward. Her husband tried to stop her, but she pulled free. She walked right up to the edge of the cave, standing next to her son, and looked up at 4 to 7 of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. "My name is Rachel," she called out, her voice amplified by Billy's translation device. "I'm a teacher. Just a regular person from a regular planet. And I'm offering to help you. Not just my son. All of us. Humanity. We can teach you what you've forgotten. How to connect. How to feel. How to remember not just what happened, but why it matters." She paused, looking at each massive creature. "You've spent millions of years alone. That ends now. If you want it to." Silence. The kind of silence that feels like the universe itself is holding its breath. Then, slowly, the dragons began to land. What happened next was the strangest diplomatic mission in human history. Rachel stood there in the asteroid field, surrounded by 4 to 7 ancient space dragons, and realized she had absolutely no plan. She'd just volunteered humanity to save an entire alien species, and she taught second-grade math to mining colony kids. But then something unexpected happened. Other humans started showing up. Word spread fast through the colonies. The story of Billy Carter and the Lonely Dragon hit every news feed in human space. Most people thought it was a hoax at first. But when video footage showed dozens of Drakelians gathered peacefully in one place, something that had never happened in recorded history, people paid attention. Volunteers started arriving within days. Teachers like Rachel. Psychologists curious about alien minds. Linguists who wanted to understand dragon communication. Even a children's entertainer named Danny who figured if he could make kids laugh, maybe he could make dragons laugh too. Captain Lisa's small salvage ship became a constant ferry service, bringing humans to the asteroid field. The early days were rough. The dragons were terrible students. They were impatient, arrogant, and kept trying to analyze emotions like they were solving math problems. One dragon named Ironwing got so frustrated during a lesson about empathy that it accidentally melted a small asteroid with its plasma breath. But the humans kept trying. Rachel worked with Ashenwing, building on what Billy had already taught. She brought simple human things. Photos of families. Music. Storybooks. Things that carried emotion, not just information. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week. A psychology professor named Jennifer was working with a dragon called Stormclaw, one of the oldest and most stubborn of the group. They'd been going in circles for hours. Stormclaw kept insisting it didn't need to understand feelings, only facts. Then Jennifer asked a simple question. "In all your millions of years, what's the one thing you wish you could experience again?" Stormclaw went very still. The translation device stayed silent for a long time. Then, slowly, words appeared. "I do not know. I have perfect memory of everything I have experienced. But I cannot remember what any of it felt like. It is like having a library of every book ever written, but I have forgotten how to read." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "That sounds terrifying." "Yes," Stormclaw typed. And then, for the first time in its impossibly long existence, it added 3 more words that changed everything. "I am afraid." That admission cracked something open. Within hours, other dragons started sharing their own fears. Fear of the forgetting. Fear of dying alone. Fear that their entire species would vanish and nobody would remember they existed. Fear that they'd wasted millions of years observing life instead of living it. The humans listened. They didn't try to fix everything or explain it away. They just listened. And somehow, that simple act of being heard helped more than any lesson could. Billy spent most of his time translating between the humans and dragons, helping bridge the gap. He'd become something like an ambassador, though he still thought of himself as just a kid who liked video games. His parents worried about him taking on so much responsibility, but they also saw how happy he was. How purposeful. One afternoon, Billy sat with a dragon named Cinderfang, teaching it about friendship using a deck of cards. Tom watched from a distance, still amazed that his son was casually playing cards with a creature that could swallow a spaceship whole. "Your offspring has taught us more in weeks than we learned in millennia," Cinderfang's translation appeared. "How did humans become so skilled at connection?" Billy shrugged. "I guess because we have to be. Humans don't live very long compared to you. We only get like 80 or 90 years if we're lucky. So we can't waste time being alone. We need each other." "That seems like a weakness." "Maybe," Billy said, dealing another hand. "But it's also our strength. We know our time is short, so we make it matter. Every friendship, every laugh, every moment with people we care about. It all counts because we don't have millions of years to waste. Sindafeng was quiet for a long moment. I have existed for 2 million years. I remember the birth of stars. But I cannot remember what it feels like to matter to anyone. Your short lives have more meaning than my eternity. Billy reached out and touched the dragon's claw. Then let's change that. Starting now. The real turning point came during the 6th week. The dragons had been learning, growing, changing. But the forgetting was still progressing. Several dragons were having more frequent memory lapses. Time was running out. That's when Jennifer proposed something radical. The forgetting happened because dragon minds became overloaded with information they couldn't process emotionally. Every memory was just data, piling up endlessly until their consciousness drowned in it. But what if they could organize those memories differently? Instead of cataloging facts, what if they anchored memories to emotions? Humans did this naturally. We don't remember the exact date of every good day, but we remember how those days felt. The joy, the warmth, the connection. Those emotional anchors help organize millions of memories without overwhelming us. The dragons were skeptical. But they were also desperate. They agreed to try. The process was intense. Each dragon worked with a human partner, going through their memories and finding emotional meaning in them. A supernova wasn't just an explosion anymore, it was awe-inspiring beauty. A fallen civilization wasn't just historical data, it was a tragedy worth mourning. Millions of years of experiences were being recontextualized through the lens of emotion. It was exhausting work for both species. But slowly, impossibly, it started working. Ashenwing was the first to show improvement. The dragon's memory lapses decreased. Its eyes seemed brighter, more focused. Billy cried when Ashenwing remembered his name after a full day apart, something that hadn't happened in weeks. I remember you, Ashenwing said through the translator. Not just your designation. I remember how it feels when you laugh. How patient you are when teaching. How you held my claw when I was afraid. These are not facts. These are feelings. And feelings help me remember why memories matter. Other dragons began improving too. Not cured, but stabilized. The forgetting slowed. Some even showed signs of reversal. Their minds, organized by emotional connection instead of raw data, could finally process their vast experiences without drowning. But the real miracle was simpler than all that. The dragons were learning to be happy. To laugh. To look forward to tomorrow instead of being buried by yesterday. They were learning what humans had known all along. Life isn't about how long you exist, it's about the connections you make while you're here. 6 months after Billy's abduction, the asteroid field had transformed into something between a school, a therapy center, and a community. Humans and dragons worked together daily. Friendships formed between species that should have been impossible. Children from various colonies came to visit, unafraid of the massive creatures that were once considered monsters. Ashenwing, the dragon who'd started it all by kidnapping one scared boy, chose a new name. Through the translator, it announced itself as Ashenwing the Friend. The first dragon in history to define itself through connection rather than isolation. Billy stood with his parents, watching dragons and humans share a meal together. Well, separate meals since dragons ate things humans couldn't digest, but sharing the same space, the same moment. You saved them, Rachel said, hugging her son. Billy shook his head. We saved each other. That's what friends do. Years passed. The dragons recovered enough to return to space, but they weren't solitary anymore. They stayed in contact with each other and with humanity. They built a new society based on connection. They became teachers, sharing millions of years of knowledge but now understanding why that knowledge mattered. Billy grew up to become humanity's official ambassador to the Drakelians. Not bad for a kid who'd once been kidnapped by a space dragon. And sometimes, on quiet nights, Ashenwing would visit Colony 17. The massive dragon would land gently in the settlement square, where children would gather to hear stories about the time before the bridge between species was built. About loneliness and connection. About how sometimes the scariest monsters just need a friend. Because in the end, that's what changed everything. Not science or technology or diplomatic treaties. Just one small boy who decided that even ancient space dragons deserved to know what it felt like to not be alone.